We all know about the 1997 series King of the Hill. It is still airing on Cartoon Network's Adult Swim block, but I discovered something dark with the series sometime in around 2007. I was in a Goodwill store to buy some Nintendo 64 games because that store normally had a good stock of retro games. However, I strolled over to the VHX section in the back just remembering that I owned a VCR. One of the first things I saw was the Titanic VHS tapes, the one that came in 2 tapes, but it was in one dust cover. I thought it would be a good movie for me and the wife, as she never had seen it before. To ensure the tapes would be functional, I took one of the tapes out of the dual VHS dust cover to only see something unexpected on the front of the label. It was a VHS tape with a crooked sticker on it, written in Sharpie was KTOH S1 ER and R. I expected the other tape, and it said KTOH S1 ER and R Part 2. I assumed it was Part 2. I did not know why one 23-minute episode took 2 VHS tapes, or even why were they being sold as Titanic. But I was curious. I bought the 2 tapes for $2.22. When I got home, nobody was there but me, therefore I had to take up the painstaking process of uncoiling the coaxial cords and the bulky VCR. Soon I turned the TV to channel 3 VHF and began viewing KTOH S1 ER and R. It had the regular opening of the first episode of King of the Hill, but without the music. It was just a silent camera panning over the city of Allen, and began normally after that, with Bobby at the baseball game and Hank yelling at him. As we all know, Bobby didn't succeed. This is where everything got strange and unusual. On the ride home, Hank and Peggy were completely silent, and this went on for about 3 minutes. No one was angry, no one had any expression actually, just complete blank faces with only silence for company. Abruptly, the family pulls into the driveway. It cut to the scene inside the house. Hank was yelling at Bobby for not giving them 110%. Hank then picked up the baseball and got into a throwing position. At this point, the video quality was starting to get very scaggery, and the volume level was raised roughly by 10%. Hank pegged the ball and hit Bobby's nose. Peggy was seen in the background crying, and Hank simply told her to shut the hell up. Bobby immediately cupped his nose and ran out of the room, crying the whole way. As Bobby was in the bathroom checking his nose, a social worker came to the door. Peggy greeted him as Hank sat on the sofa, relaxing as if nothing had happened. From this point, the colors began to look more like the real episode. The scene with Hank telling the social worker off played as it did in the real episode. Suddenly, the scene from the official episode cut to another scene, which was not from the real episode. It was from a scene with more negative video, yet the audio remained the same. The scene predicted Peggy sitting on the phone late at night, most likely contacting child services to tell how Hank purposely threw the baseball at Bobby. Hank suddenly walked through the doorway. He was in a bathrobe and no glasses, and then he grabbed the phone. "Who the hell is this?" Hank yelled. "This is the Department of Child Services," was the response. Hank's face quickly turned red and slammed the phone back off the wall. He gasped Peggy by the neck. "What are you gonna get more of these twig boys over here to put me in prison and take my boy away?" he yelled. The scene cut to Hank taking Peggy by the neck down of the hallway to the backyard. Hank took a propane tank off the grill and shoved the valve into Peggy's mouth. The video then went silent for a minute, with simply showing the propane tank in Peggy's mouth. When the scene started moving again, Peggy's eyes slowly closed and a voice was heard. "Buck Strickland. Forgive me for using propane for this." The only problem is when Hank said this, Hank didn't even sound like Mike Judge, the creator of the show who voiced Hank. It sounded like an older and deeper voice. The screen went black after this. I fast forward for much of the rest of the tape to make sure there was no more content on it. There was none. I just thought to myself, why so much wasted space? At this point, I was really shaken up. I went to grab a cup of coffee. When I got back, I popped in the second tape. It was just a back screen. I fast forwarded to check for content, and eventually came some stuff that was really starting to scare me. It was a funeral, but there were very few colors, only really form of gray and black, and colors of people's faces. It didn't seem like a real KTOH episode. The funeral was for Peggy. Attending it was all the Hills neighbors, including some acquaintances such as Hank's father Cotton and John Leghorn. Even Hank was there, claiming that Peggy had committed suicide. As Peggy's coffin was lowered into the hole, it faded into overhead view of it being lowered. This part really scared the shit out of me. It was somewhat highly realistic image of Peggy in the coffin. The reason I say somewhat is because it looked real, but it still appeared to be drawn and not a real person. It was just a realistic cartoon. The scene cut to Bobby, Hank, and Ladybird sitting on the porch. Bobby had a queasy face, and Hank had one hand on the propane tank that he used to commit the murder. Bobby turned to his father. "Why did you do it, Dad?" he asked in a humble voice. "I don't know, son," Hank responded, almost sounding like he was crying. He then stood up and walked inside, leaving Bobby and Ladybird, who was still on the porch. It once again cut to a very dull scene, but nothing but gray, black, and the skin colors. It was a scene that was really making me sick to my stomach. It was Hank hanging from the ceiling with a note pinned on him that this stayed focused saying back and forth for a minute or so. Then it cut to the ending credits with the normal outro on music. I was kind of laughing on the inside that the fact that the show was playing the regular ending credits after all the fucking stuff that happened, and after more confused and creeped out about it. I went on some forums and found nothing about this episode. However, I came some answers on you answers who were similar to experience Cohen's and me. They received a similar tape at a thrift shop in Johns Creek County in North Georgia, a place 20 miles away from where I got mine. I managed to get on AIM with this person, but I got no answers. I was really curious at this point, so I drove about 40 miles and right down to the Cartoon Network Turner Broadcasting headquarters. I knew Fox Broadcasting had made the show, but I assumed Cartoon Network had every episode on record, since they aired them all. Beforehand, I did some research to figure out who was in charge of broadcasting KTOH, so I found a receptionist and demanded to talk to him. Apparently, though, I needed a guest pass of some sort. I was completely pissed off at this point, so I drove back home and put on my old sheriff's uniform. I was the sheriff for Johns Creek County about 3 years ago, circa 2004. I went back after it was unlawful, and used my badge to talk to him. When I got to his office, he was just sitting at his desk on his phone. I walked up to him, threw the tapes on his desk, and demanded answers. He dropped the phone immediately and grabbed the tapes. I followed him to the other office on the other side of the building. There was a small safe in his office. He opened it up and put the tapes back in, and locked it. Then he told me to leave. I did not want to act like a sheriff anymore, because I didn't want to get in trouble with the law. So I left. I got home and flipped on the TV. Adult Swim was on, and was relieved to receive a real episode of King of the Hill. To this day, only 2 copies on 4 tapes that I could find anything about on the internet. I assume one of them is still locked up in Cartoon Network studios. You may possibly come across one of these in the thrift shops throughout the Southeast.